The Judge's House by Bram Stoker. Chapter 1. It was April, and John Moore was studying for an important examination. As the date of the exam came nearer, he decided to go somewhere and read by himself. He did not want the amusements of the seaside or the beauties of the countryside. He decided to find a quiet, ordinary little town and work there undisturbed. He packed his suitcases with clothes and books. Then he looked in a railway timetable for a town that he did not know. He found one and bought a ticket to go there. He did not tell anyone where he was going. After all, he did not want to be disturbed. That is how Moore arrived at Benchurch. It was a market town, and once a week it was quite busy for a few hours. The rest of the time, it was a very quiet, sleepy little place. Moore spent his first night at the only hotel in the town. The landlady was very kind and helpful, but the hotel was not really quiet enough for him. The second day, he started looking for a house to rent. There was only one place that he liked. It was more than quiet. It was deserted and very lonely. It was a big, old 17th century house. It had tiny windows like a prison, and a high brick wall all round it. It would be hard to imagine a more unwelcoming place, but it suited Moore perfectly. He went to find the local lawyer who was responsible for the house. Mr. Carnford, the lawyer, was very happy to rent the house to him. "I'd be glad to let you have it free," he said, "just to have somebody living in it again after all these years. It's been empty so long that people have spread a lot of foolish stories about it. You'll be able to prove that the stories are wrong." Moore did not think it was necessary to ask the lawyer for more details of the foolish stories. He paid his rent, and Mr. Carnford gave him the name of an old servant to look after him. He came away from the lawyer's office with the keys of the house in his pocket. He then went to Mrs. Wood, the landlady of the hotel. "I'm renting a house for a few weeks," he said. "Can you advise me about shopping, please? What do you think I shall need?" "Where are you going to stay, sir?" the landlady asked. Moore told her. She threw up her hands in horror. "Not the Judge's house?" she said, and she grew pale as she spoke. He asked her to tell him more about the house. "Why is it called the Judge's house?" he said. "And why doesn't anyone want to live in it?" Chapter 2. "Well, sir," she said, "a long time ago, I don't know how long, a judge lived there. He was a hard, cruel judge, sir, a real hanging judge. He showed no mercy to anyone. But as for the house itself, well, I can't say. I've often asked, but nobody could tell me for certain." She found it hard to explain. The general feeling in the town was that there was something strange about the judge's house. "As for me, sir," she said, "I won't stay there alone, not for all the money in the bank." Then she apologized to Moore. "I'm sorry to worry you, sir, really I am. But if you were my son, I wouldn't let you stay there one night on your own. I'd go there myself and pull the big alarm bell that's on the roof." Moore was grateful for her kindness and her anxiety. "How good of you to be so anxious about me, Mrs. Wood," he said. "But there's really no need to worry. I'm studying for an important examination, and I have no time for horrors or mysteries." The landlady kindly promised to do his shopping for him. Moore then went to see the old servant, whom Mr. Carnford had recommended to him. Her name was Mrs. Dempster, and she seemed pleasant and eager to please her new master. When he returned with her to the judge's house 2 hours later, he found Mrs. Wood waiting outside it. She had several people with her, men and boys carrying parcels, and another 2 men with a bed. "But there are beds in the house," cried Moore in surprise. "And nobody slept in them for 50 years or more. No, sir, I won't let you risk your life in an old damp bed." The landlady was obviously curious to see the inside of the house. At the same time, she was clearly afraid. At the smallest noise, she held nervously to Moore's arm. Together, they explored the whole house. After his exploration, Moore decided to live in the dining room. It was big enough for both working and sleeping. Mrs. Wood and Mrs. Dempster began to arrange everything. Soon the baskets were unpacked. Moore saw that kind Mrs. Wood had brought many good things from her own kitchen. Before she left, she turned to Moore and said, "I do hope you will be all right, sir. But I must say, I couldn't sleep here with all those ghosts." When she left, Mrs. Dempster laughed. "Ghosts?" she said. "Ghosts? There are no ghosts. There are rats and insects and doors that need oiling. There are windows that blow open in the wind. Look at the old oak walls of this room, sir. They are old, hundreds of years old. Don't you think there'll be rats and insects behind the wood? You'll see plenty of rats here, sir, but you won't see any ghosts, I'm sure of that. Now you go and have a nice walk, sir, and when you come back, I'll have this room all ready for you." She kept her promise. When Moore returned, he found the room clean and neat. A fire was burning in the ancient fireplace. She had lit the lamp and put his supper ready on the table. "Good night, sir," she said. "I have to go now and get my husband's supper. I'll see you in the morning." "This is wonderful," said Moore to himself, as he ate Mrs. Dempster's excellent food. When he had finished his supper, he pushed the dishes to the other end of the table. He put more wood on the fire and began to study. Chapter 3. Moore worked without stopping until about 11 o'clock. Then he put some more wood on the fire. He also made a pot of tea. He was enjoying himself very much. The fire was burning brightly. The firelight danced on the old oak walls and threw strange shadows around the room. His tea tasted excellent, and there was nobody to disturb him. Then, for the first time, he noticed how much noise the rats were making. Were they making all this noise while I was studying? He thought. No, I don't think they were. Perhaps they were afraid of me at first. Now they have become braver, and they're running about as usual. How busy they were, and what a lot of noise they made. Up and down they rushed, behind the old oak walls, over the ceiling and under the floor. Moore remembered Mrs. Dempster's words. "You'll see plenty of rats, but you won't see any ghosts." "Well," he said with a smile, "she was right about the rats anyway." He picked up the lamp and looked around the room. "How strange," he said to himself. "Why doesn't anybody want to live in this beautiful old house?" The oak walls were very beautiful. There were some old pictures on the walls, but they were covered with dust and dirt, and he could not see them clearly. Here and there he saw small holes in the walls. From time to time the curious face of a rat stared at him. Then with a scratch and a squeak, it was gone. The thing that interested him most, however, was the rope of the great alarm bell on the roof. The rope hung down in a corner of the room, on the right-hand side of the fireplace. He found a huge high-backed oak chair and pulled it up beside the fire. There he sat and drank his last cup of tea. Then he put more wood on the fire and sat down at the table again with his books. For a time the rats disturbed him with their scratching and squeaking. But he got used to the noise, and soon he forgot everything except his work. Suddenly he looked up. Something had disturbed him, but he did not know what it was. He sat up and listened. The room was silent. That was it. The noise of the rats had stopped. "That's what disturbed me," said Moore with a smile. He looked around the room. and saw an enormous rat. It was sitting on the great high-backed chair by the fire, and it was staring at him with hate in its small red eyes. Moore picked up a book and pretended to throw it, but the rat did not move. It showed its great white teeth angrily, and its cruel eyes shone mercilessly in the lamplight. "Why, you—" cried Moore. He picked up the poker from the fireplace and jumped up. Before he could hit the rat, however, it jumped to the floor with a squeak. It ran up the rope of the alarm bell and disappeared in the darkness. Strangely, the squeaks and scratches of the rats in the walls began again. By this time, Moore no longer felt like working. Outside the house the birds were singing. Soon it would be morning. He climbed into bed and immediately fell asleep.